Welcome back. We will be discussing the Gilded Age. I will give the same warning that I gave at the beginning of the Reconstruction lecture. These videos are broad brushstrokes. All right, I'm not going into really the nitty gritty of much of anything. These are meant to be supplementary to your textbook and to the other readings that are given out in class. So certainly you need to listen to these. I highlight important points that will be on the exam, but again, we're not going, there's too much to go through all of this in any great length. There would be a semester long course at the very least on the Gilded Age, in my opinion, if we were to do that. So politics in the Gilded Age. Corrupt. We're in the age of Tammany Hall and Boss Tweed and political machines. And it certainly makes for an interesting story, and we'll get into that in just a second. The big idea here, beginning with the election of Ulysses S. Grant in 1868, a series of mostly Republican pro-business presidents will oversee an enormous economic growth whose benefits will largely elude most Americans. So the rich figure out how to get very rich. There is no real middle class as we know it or knew it, and the poor stay poor. So the Gilded Age here era was filled with corruption, very close presidential elections. Again, there were political machines at work, both on the Democratic and Republican sides. If you look at the cartoon here, I like these slides, particularly because of their inclusion of all these cartoons. There's a guy, he's got his foot on the American bald eagle. Congress and the legislature, they're in chains. The signs on the wall. I don't take any stock in this silly nonsense about working for anybody's good but our own. And then over here, when we make a move, we do it because it is in our own interest to do so. I always find the anti-monopolists come the cheapest. Yeah. By the middle of the 19th century, the legal system had been reshaped to the advantage of men of commerce and industry at the expense of farmers, workers, consumers, and other less powerful groups within the society. It actively promoted a legal redistribution of wealth against the weakest groups in society. And that really sums it up. I mean, the rich were out for themselves. I mean, we're not seeing the social safety net yet, as we discussed in class today. I mean, there was a very laissez-faire attitude, probably a overbelief that the market would correct itself with a minimum of government intervention. The term Gilded Age was termed by Mark Twain, who I was very happy you knew today, whose real name was Samuel Clemens. It had the appearance of a golden age. I mean, we had also the Second Industrial Revolution. America was coming into its own as a power, not a superpower yet, but its own, coming out from the shadow of the European monarchies. But we still had significant social, political, and economic problems in the late 1800s. We were just coming out of the Civil War. We were still figuring out how to rebuild. We were still figuring out how to exist as not a North and a South, but as one country. And, it wasn't easy. So the Gilded Age was characterized by massive technological change, pro-business government policies, mass consumption, marketing, business consolidation. You see here, Italian cheap labor. There's a guy here in a very fancy dress. He might own this mine. These people might be more expensive to pay and feed than these Italians who are coming in cheap. I mean, this is really the really sums up what the what the whole age was about, really, in this one picture, to my mind, anyway. So during the Gilded Age, the federal government took a laissez-faire approach in dealing with these problems. Uh, Again, I love these political cartoons. A government of the people, for the people. There's the U.S. Treasury. There's Standard Oil. So which way is the money flowing? This isn't oil that's coming out of it, but the U.S. Treasury is pouring money right into Standard Oil. So from 1870 to 1900, 30-year period, the government did very little domestically. If you take a plain text reading of the Constitution, the federal government is only, I think, allowed to do 20-something, 23 or 24 different things. I haven't counted in a minute. My memory might be a little faulty on that score. But what they did, they delivered the mail. They maintained a national military. They collected taxes and tariffs. They conducted a foreign policy, and the lone exception here, the kind of the oddball out, was the federal government administered the annual Civil War veterans pension. So that was kind of seen as something exceptional, something kind of beyond the laissez-faire purview of this period. So in the late 1800s, this was before the platform swap where the Republicans became the Democrats and the Democrats the Republicans. The Democrats had very strong support in the South, as you can see. The Republicans were popular in the North and West. They had the support of the Grand Army of the Republic, which was an organization of Union veterans. They still exist today under a different name, the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War. There's also an organization, Sons of Confederate Veterans of the Civil War, as well. And there were pretty well-defined voting blocs in the era as well. White Southerners, Catholics, recent immigrants, especially Jewish people, urban working poor, most farmers. Some of this hasn't changed a whole lot. A lot of Catholics are still voting liberal, although a comment was made in class today that the younger generations might be shifting more into the Republican bloc. Pro-labor, certainly labor unions tend more reliably still to vote Democrat. Not so sure about farmers, to be quite honest. Republicans, Northern whites, African Americans, Northern Protestants, WASPs, which stands for White Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and most of the middle class, such as it was back then. Gilded Age Republicans. So Roscoe Conkling, one of my favorites, just because he was certainly a character, and I encourage you to look him up. In fact, pause the video and look him up. He's an interesting character. He was a senator from New York. But the Republican Party in the 1870s and 1880s was very much weakened by infighting. Conkling was the head of the stalwart faction. Blaine was the head of the half-breeds. Now, Conkling was a party boss. He was a powerful man in Republican politics. He picked out Chester Arthur as Garfield's vice presidential nominee. So essentially, picked out President Arthur because Garfield essentially served, I think, about 4 months before he was shot. Blaine, another interesting character, but for different reasons. So Republicans, called stalwarts, supported the spoils system. And the spoils system, it was, you kind of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours type of deal. You do a service for me, and I'll make sure that you are taken care of. So this is Conkling trying to choose a presidential nominee, Here you see Blaine, Ulysses Grant, Tilden, Davis, Train. Which one? And yeah, it's called the Boss Puzzle. Again, party boss. Some Republicans called half-breeds, led by Blaine, supported merit-based presidential appointments. So this was the ticket in 1868 for Republicans. Ulysses Grant, the great general who beat Robert E. Lee and licked the Confederacy, running with the Honorable Schleier Colfax. He was a very prominent, aside from obviously being Vice President of the United States because Grant got elected, very prominent Civil War era politician. He served notably as Speaker of the House during passage of the 13th Amendment. So, Grant, obviously a war hero, no experience at all, but we're putting him up, the Republicans. I mean, great name recognition, saved the country. Let's see what he can do, and obviously he was successful. This is a funny one. Grant and Colfax, tanners, Washington, D.C., respectfully inform the people of the United States that they will be engaged in tanning old Democratic hides until after the 3rd day of November 1868. The senior member of the firm, meaning General Grant, having considerable experience in the business, thinks that, by the help of his partner, all work will be done in a satisfactory manner. And the references are all Confederate generals that Grant beat: Buckner, R.E. Lee, Robert E. Lee, General Pemberton, and other distinguished persons of the same persuasion. If only political messaging could still be this civilized, because this is funny. At least I think so. Democrats in this election nominated Horatio Seymour. The party was still very much divided, and Seymour refused to reimburse the greenbacked dollar, which made him deeply, deeply unpopular. And this was the election. Grant won by, reliving his war victories. There was a question about if his association with Johnson, President Andrew Johnson, kind of tainted him a little bit. I really don't think so. I mean, Grant was general of the Army, during Johnson's administration. He answered to Johnson as his commander-in-chief. There wasn't really much of a choice. If Johnson ordered him to do something, well, he had to do it. So Grant, 2 terms, 1869 to 1877, from Ohio, educated at West Point, member of the Republican Party, 46 years old, little older at that time, not so old today, when we have 60, 70-year-old people running for president. Vice Presidents Schleier Colfax in his first term, Henry Wilson in his second. 5'8", about average height for the time. Nicknames: Useless, rhymes with Ulysses; Unconditional Surrender, because he wouldn't accept any conditions for Lee's surrender; the hero of Appomattox courthouse being where he accepted Lee's formal surrender. Yeah. He says, labor disgraces man. Unfortunately, you occasionally find men disgrace labor. Ranks kind of in the middle of presidents. He smoked tens of thousands of cigars as president, and he eventually died of throat cancer. Real sad at the end there. He was very worried about how his family was going to be taken care of after his death. So he started working on his memoirs because there was interest in those. Grant had been bankrupted in a Ponzi scheme and had throat cancer. He was working on his memoirs to try to save his family's financial future after he had passed on. So when Grant was about to sign a contract to publish his memoirs for 10% royalty, Twain intervened, calling it exploitation. Through his own publishing company, Twain offered Grant an unprecedented 70% of the profits or a 20% royalty. And when Twain visited Grant at Mount McGregor, while General Grant was in extreme pain and unable to speak, they communicated via handwritten notes as Grant raced to finish the manuscript days before he died in July 1885. And the personal memoirs of U.S. Grant was a massive success, sold 300,000 sets in its first printing. Twain presented Julia Grant with a check for $200,000, which was the largest single royalty check paid at that time, which eventually totaling roughly about $450,000, which would equal about 12 to 15 million today. And this started a tradition of former presidents writing memoirs for public consumption. So the era of good stealings. During Grant's administration, an underhanded marriage will occur between politicians and businessmen that will last through the Gilded Age. Grant was a good guy. He really was, but he was not a great politician. So the Gilded Age, politics were very intimately tied to big business, with tariffs, currency manipulation, corporate expansion, laissez-faire policies, which endangered calls for reform. Railroad promoters routinely cheated customers out of money. The stock market, investors stole from clients. Many judges and politicians could be bought. That was very easy to do. Again, we're living in the age right now, meaning the Gilded Age. When I say right now, of the political machine. You could buy yourself a judge. No problem. So Jay Gould in 1869 wanted to control the gold market and encouraged President Grant to stop the Treasury from selling it. Also, Tammany Hall in New York City, led by Boss Tweed, cheated the city of $250 million around. Can you imagine how much that would be today? Through theft, rigged elections, and bribery. And you don't have to imagine. $4,052,751,064 and $2,007, which would be more than that today. And this was what Tammany Hall looked like. That was the Democratic Party machine. That's something. That's a beautiful looking building. Yeah. Tammany Hall depicted as a tiger killing Lady Liberty. There's a lot of corruption. A lot of corruption. So in cities, political machines like Tammany Hall provided social services in exchange for political clout. They would offer all sorts of things: clothing, food, shelter. I mean, if you'd go knock on doors, if you'd vote for said candidate, I mean, it wouldn't totally be unheard of for somebody just to give you money and say, go vote for the Democrat, and you better do it, or I'll find out, and you'd go do it. So the New York Times finally showed evidence of Boss Tweed's misdeeds, and Tweed was imprisoned as a result. Again, Boss Tweed, your textbook, and certainly the assignments I gave you to do for Thursday will tell you more about him. Thomas Nast, very talented. He was the first guy to depict Santa Claus as chubby and with a red suit. Uh, yeah, that's an opium pipe you're looking at. That part of the Santa Claus description has not survived the ages. Yep. Santa Claus is watching. So Grant, I mean, again, laid back guy, decent guy, not a great politician, failed to see the corruption around him. I beg to repeat that these frauds on the government shall be probed to the very bottom. There is Tammany ring, the canal ring, the whiskey ring, the Indian ring, press ring, state ring, county ring, town ring, all the things, all the frauds that were being purported. Uh, so his cabinet, except Hamilton Fish and his in-laws, the Dent family, the in-laws, man, they were something else. They were especially corrupt, again, with the exception of Hamilton Fish. Lobbyists, and this hotel is still around. The people who waited in the lobby of the Washington Hotel Grant liked to stay at, representing companies, they sought to gain favor with the president and members of Congress. Literally, what they would do was just wait in the lobby of the hotel. This is how they got their name. And as soon as Grant would come out, they would pounce. Or members of Congress. I mean, it was certainly a way to be heard. I'm sure President Grant and the members of Congress staying at the hotel didn't particularly like it. So the credit mobilier scandal happened on his watch. A railroad construction company overcharged the federal government for its work on the Transcontinental Railroad. The Pacific Railway Company also gave some congressmen and even the vice president free stocks. Very, very illegal. Yeah, the Union Pacific started in Nebraska going west. It had been given 12 million acres of free land and 27 million in government bonds. It created the Credit Mobilier Company and gave them 94 million for construction when the actual cost was 44 million shares in the Credit Mobilier Company were sold to congressmen to prevent investigation. The Union Pacific used 20,000 workers, war veterans, and Irish immigrants who laid 5 miles of track a day and died by the hundreds in the heat, the cold, and the battles with Indians opposing the invasion of their territory. So, I mean, I really don't know what to say about this, except, I mean, this encapsulates the Gilded Age. This is corruption at its finest. We're going to give shares to congressmen so they don't investigate us. That really says it all. The New York City newspaper busted it, this scandal. Only 2 members of Congress, however, were formally censured as a result. In 1875, the whiskey ring was busted. Members of the executive branch stole taxes from whiskey. That's what that was. And there at the sign at the back, I beg to repeat that these frauds on the government should be probed to the very bottom, the bottom of the barrel. So in 1876, Secretary of War William Belknap was caught selling old equipment and weapons to Indians who we were actively engaged in fighting for $24,000. $435,210 and $2,007. So by the election of 1872, the corruption of Grant and his administration was coming to the attention of the public. Again, how much Grant knew, how much Grant really had control, is a question I haven't fully settled in my mind. That's just something that you should consider. The guy was a general. The guy was a military man. I'm thinking of the Duke of Wellington who defeated Napoleon. He was made Prime Minister of the United Kingdom after the Napoleonic War, and he famously quipped that politics was harder than being a field marshal and defeating Napoleon, because politicians don't follow orders. And it made his job hard, and I'm sure Grant felt similarly. Probably Eisenhower, too. So the liberal Republican Party, a faction, sought to reform the government and end the corruption. They put Horace Greeley up for president. Obviously, we know how this ends. "I hardly knew whether I was running for the presidency or the penitentiary," says Horace Greeley, and this gives you an idea of what really was going on at the time with all these, with all the corruption and all the scandals and everything. So the Democratic Party supported Greeley, too, because he promised to end Reconstruction. And this was great for the southern states, where the Democratic Party was strongest at the time. "Anything to beat Grant" was the Democratic slogan in 1872. Not because we've got better ideas, but just anything to beat Grant. Get him out of office. So the election of 1872 was filled with mudslinging, which people, are just kind of saying things. I mean, there are a lot of correlations you can draw between this time and today. Up here, you must make your choice. Washington, Lincoln on the other side, Grant, trying to paint Grant as a heroic figure. Then at the bottom, Jefferson Davis, Horace Greeley. So which one do you want? You want the Southern rebels, the people who were against the country or who fought to preserve it? So Greeley was called an atheist. Doesn't seem like much today, but back then, I mean, if you were not a Christian, that was not a mark in your favor. Greeley was called an atheist, a communist, a vegetarian, a signer of Jefferson Davis's bail bond, which happened to be true. Grant was called an ignoramus drunk. And the drinking thing had followed Grant around for a long time. I'm not entirely sure that he was guilty of drinking as much as people said he did, but that's an entirely different matter. So Grant crushed Greeley in electoral and popular votes. Crushed him. 55.5 to 44%. Minor parties got 0.5% of votes. Grant got 81% of the Electoral College. But look here, the Democrats were so divided. So Greeley died shortly after the election. So we will pick it up there with a part 2.